All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Mythology. So today, we're going to walk into Norse mythology. So my general game plan for this week, just kind of give you some exposure, show you what it's about, make sure you sort of understand the framework for this, and then next week, hopefully, we'll jump into some stories. Okay, so you'll probably get a few stories from me today too, but at least give you a taste. Okay, that's kind of what I want to move into. Now, I like going to Norse mythology after we hit Greek and Roman for a couple different reasons. One, it is really popular right now. A lot of people are really into Norse mythology for various reasons. Some of the influences of the Marvel movies and the influences of metal music and video games all kind of combined to make this kind of an intriguing mythology to a lot of people. Also, though, it is another pantheon religion based mythology. So, like in Greek and Roman, you have like one set of gods and goddesses that sort of dominate the stories. Norse mythology is also a god dominated mythology. Not all of them are like that, but that's kind of the popular trend here today. And so I'm going to kind of show you this one and kind of smoothly move into it. Now, as far as the tone of the stories and the content of the stories, it's going to be a lot different. Now, if you were in class right now, and maybe you are, and I don't know when this is actually going to be seen. I filmed it during our quarantine, so you guys don't have notes packets for this right now. But had you had them, you'd notice it's going to be a lot shorter than our Greek and Roman unit. And the reason for that is Norse mythology is actually kind of like a summary mythology, right? Because when we think of Norse, a lot of times people think like Vikings or nomads or something like that. And there's a reason for that, which I'll get to in a second. But the people who were writing these stories, their lifestyle did not really lend itself to long prose. Okay. And so we basically have the prose edda and the poetic edda, and that's the source of almost all Norse mythology. And it's almost like an outline form. Like we get some really great story development, and we have a lot of points where it could have been great story development, but it just kind of ends. And so it's almost an incomplete mythology in that regard, and so it won't take us near as long to cover. So I just want to walk through a couple things here today, jump you into the Norse stuff. First thing to understand as far as like culture goes, Norse is a much larger cultural group than we were looking at with the Greek and Romans, because Greek and Roman, we're talking like one dominant society. You have the Greek Empire, you have the Roman Empire. Norse is a lot of different cultures sort of coming together. It's everything in Europe that is not Celtic. Okay, so basically you're talking all of Northern Europe and Russia. Okay, because of that, you have two major groups. You have the Germanic group and the Slavic group. Germanic group would be your Northern Europeans, and then your Slavic group would be your Russians. Now, when we think of the people who wrote these stories down, though, the Russian group does not get very much attention because the people who actually recorded these were of Scandinavian and Icelandic descent, which is why typically we associate Norse mythology with like Vikings and people like that, because it was that particular nomadic group that really wrote down and popularized the version that we still have today. Okay. So just a little visual for you. That is Iceland and Scandinavia. Okay. So that's most of Northern Europe. Here's like Northern Europe in a little bit bigger picture. So you have like this, like Latvia, Estonia, the Baltic states here, Lithuania. And then this is Russia, in case you did not know what Russia looked like. Fun fact, this little orange blob over here is Belarus, which is where I used to live. Okay. So division of the deities, got to get this. When we're talking Norse gods, we actually kind of have like two tribes of the Norse gods when it all gets started, which we didn't have anything like that in Greek and Roman mythology. So you have the Aesir and you have the Vanir. Okay. And you will find those pronounced different ways if you like watch videos online or you read different things. Different people will say them slightly differently. I go Aesir, Vanir. You can take it different ways. So the Aesir are supposed to be the more warlike, more dominant group. They live in Asgard. If you've watched the Marvel movies, that's the group you're probably most familiar with. And the Vanir are supposed to be the more peaceful, loving group that lives in Vanaheim. Now the difference, when we look at Norse mythology, though, is that peaceful is an incredibly relative term, because I don't know that there's anything super peaceful about Norse mythology in general at all. Okay. And so they just, I don't know, I guess they kill less people, or maybe they're happy when they kill people. Either way, you have these two tribes. Eventually, there will be a domination of one of the tribes, but for right now, kind of understand that. I'm going to link the video to this creation account actually in a classroom as well, or you can type that link in if you choose to do that. But once you watch that, look over it. But in general, here's the gist of what your creation account is going to be like. And I love creation accounts because I think they set tone. And when you watch that video, you're going to notice from the very beginning that tone in the creation account is incredibly dark, very depressing. You have like this undertone of death and devastation, and that is what this mythology is going to be like. So if you were coming to this looking for like uplifting stories, yeah, this is probably not going to happen. Okay. What we have from the beginning here is kind of similar to what happens in Greek creation, right? Like in Greek creation, you have everything coming out of chaos. In Norse creation, they also have a chaos, but they don't call it chaos. They call it Gnungagap. And out of Gnungagap, which is this vast nothingness, comes stuff. Specifically, Niflheim and Muspelheim, a place of ice and a place of fire. They're kind of close to each other, like these two worlds, one above the other. And the fireplace causes the ice place to start to melt. That melting then leads to life. Okay, the first life that is created is this man named Ymir, who is actually a frost giant. He's the first being, like the first god-like being that is created, but he's also the original frost giant. So you have to understand this from the get-go. In Norse mythology, giants are going to be all over the place. Okay, they have the chief enemies. Well, I just whacked my computer. Chief enemies of the gods. Okay, what you have to understand though is in like Celtic mythology and Greek mythology, giants are just really tall people. But that doesn't make sense in Norse mythology because if they're just tall beings, they wouldn't be really any competition for the gods, right? But these guys are like fighting the gods, they're killing the gods, they're directly interacting with them all the time. And so what you have to get in Norse mythology is that giants are just like the gods. They're the same in substance and in every way. They're almost just like a separate race of the gods. Because in fact, sometimes you will have a god who marries a giant. That giant then comes over and lives with the gods. And from that point forward, they're referred to as a god. So this is a little different from like the Marvel rendition of it. So they're the chief enemies of the gods. They're essentially the same thing. So just think giants equal gods. You've got to understand it that way. Otherwise, it's going to get super confusing later. Okay. So when he is created, what the video leaves out, which breaks my heart, is that he actually has a six-headed son, and he also has a kid and two kids, a man and a woman that he pops out of his armpits, both of which I feel like are things you would want to talk about. Okay, but the most important thing that I want you to remember from that video is this lovely lady right here, the cosmic cow. If you've been in my class for any amount of time at all, you understand that I have a soft spot for underrepresented fantastic beasts, and this is quite possibly my very favorite. I mean, it's up there with Christ or the Flying Pig. Love, love, love the cosmic cow. Okay, this cow comes into this story. We don't know where it came from. She's just like floating out there in space and starts licking this ice, this salty ice, and actually licks the gods into existence. So the first of the Norse gods come into existence because this cosmic cow just licks them into being. That is phenomenal. Okay, so the difference between a cosmic cow and a regular cow is like the difference between a cosmic brownie and a regular brownie, right? Like if you were to go to the store in a time when that's allowed, I know right now that's not really happening, but if you want to go to the store, if you're having Walmart do a little Walmart pickup for you, and you write in there that you would like some cosmic brownies, but instead they give you the ones with the nuts on the top, you have every reason to be disappointed. Because they're not the same, right? You got nuts versus cosmic burst, right? Same thing here. You have a normal Betsy out there in the field chewing some cud, and then you have a cosmic cow who is floating out in space, licking gods into existence. She is phenomenal. This is actually an actual sighting of the cosmic cow here. There's a couple other, I mean, you can see her every once in a while, and she is phenomenal, okay? This might also be the inspiration for the classic children's rhyme, How else did the cow jump over the moon? All right, so then we move into what I would say is like that whole bad dad cycle. But in Norse mythology, we get even less information about the badness than we do in some of the other mythologies. Okay, so we know that Ymir ends up being bad. We don't know what he did. We just know that he grew evil. I mean, beats me. But whatever he did must have been really bad because Odin decides he's going to take him out. Now, that's a name you probably recognize from the Marvel movies. He is like one of the original Norse gods. He is actually the child of one of the original Norse gods. And he and his brothers, Vili and Vi, decide to take down Ymir. Okay. But they don't just kill him because that would just be way too tame for Norse mythology. Instead, they kill him, drain his blood, use that blood to then try and drown all the remaining frost giants. Doesn't completely work out because some of them jump up on a chest and like float their way to Jotunheim, which is the land of the frost giants. Again, not really sure how that happened, but this would happen. But they weren't done even after that. After trying to drown everybody in this blood, they then take his essence, his flesh, his blood, everything about him, and they create the 9 realms out of that, or create the world. So they take his flesh and they create all the land. They take his blood and they create all the water. And they take his skull, and that actually is what the sky is. And in Norse mythology, that sky is actually suspended by 4 dwarfs who are holding up 4 pillars, which are like the corners of the earth. Okay. So then, what is fun fact for us is he also takes his eyebrows and they use that to create Midgar, which is the Middle Earth, or where we as humans live. So apparently, here on Earth, we are just living on a very impressive unibrow. Okay, so that is what happens with the creation, which is super uplifting, lots of fun, right? Now, a couple of things I also understand is how the world was viewed by the Norse people. They actually viewed the world as having 9 separate realms, or almost kind of like 9 separate planets. And those planets were held on something called Yggdrasil, or the World Tree. Okay, and the World Tree is supposed to hold these up by its roots. There's different images of that. So, like, this is a classic depiction, which to me looks like something off of maybe like geometry class or something like that. This is maybe a more artistic version. I like it because it helps me visualize like the different planets all on the tree. But it's supposed to be more like the root system that has the planet system on it. But whatever, you get the idea. You have these like 9 different worlds, and the 9 worlds all are home to different beings. Now, other beings can go there, okay, but primarily 9 worlds have 9 different beings in them. So like Elfheim is where the elves live. Asgard is where the Aesir live. Jotunheim is where the Frost Giants live. Midgard is where the humans live, etc. Okay, and so that's sort of how it works, which should or could remind you of the Lord of the Rings, right? J.R.R. Tolkien, even though he was writing from definitely like a Christian standpoint, he was highly influenced by Norse mythology. He loved it. He was a big fan of the classics. And so he took a lot of that imagery and he put it into his story. So in the Lord of the Rings, you have like different realms where different beings kind of live. Now, like you have like the Shire where the hobbits live. Mostly you go to the Shire, you're going to find hobbits. Now, other creatures go there, right? So like Gandalf visits, he's a wizard. He's not a hobbit, but he can go there, so it's legal. But mostly that's what you're going to see there. And it's the same thing here. Like different beings can travel on the Bifrost, which is this rainbow gateway that they all travel on. But in general, you go to Elfheim, you're going to find elves. Okay, so that's just basically how the breakdown works. A couple things. Ratataskar, I don't know if I'm going to go into. I'm not going to post this video for right now, but the story of Ratataskar I think is interesting because what you end up having is you get a good picture of how the Norse can take something that is supposed to be typically like uplifting or cute and adorable and turn it into something very violent. So Ratataskar is actually like an evil squirrel that lives on the World Tree. Okay, and his goal is actually to destroy the World Tree. He's a messenger, so he like travels back and forth all over the World Tree, delivering messages to the various people in the different realms. But really, he just wants to destroy everything because that's his life. Okay, particularly he tries to do this by sending a message between the eagle who is at the top of the tree and the serpent or dragon that is at the bottom of the tree, more like serpent than dragon. And what he really wants to do is get them mad at each other so that they will destroy the tree for him. So he'll go up to the top of the tree and be like, hey, listen, I don't know if you heard, but that serpent down there like hates you. He thinks you're terrible, right? And he gets the eagle all mad. So then he like runs back down. He's like, hey, I don't know if you heard, dragon, but that eagle at the top thinks you are terrible, right? And so he's like spreading lies between them. Eventually, the dragon does get mad and starts like eating the bottom of the World Tree, and the eagle gets mad, starts like throwing parts of the World Tree down at the dragon. It's like almost this moment where everything is destroyed, but then it doesn't happen because it's not time for that yet. We're going to get to that in a second. But that's sort of how Norse mythology works, where you have something potentially beautiful and cute and adorable that wants to destroy everything. Okay, so that's that like kind of negative thing going on there, and the reason for that is because fatalism or being fatalistic is what I would say is like the defining feature of these Norse stories. Okay, so when we look at the whole idea of good and evil, In Greek and Roman, good and evil was based around the concept of humanity, right? Like the human soul was the standard of good and evil, and therefore anything that is human is by nature good. And that created kind of a fuzzy line, right? The line is still very fuzzy in Norse mythology because the standard of good is survival. Whatever keeps you alive the longest is good. Whatever prevents that is bad, which could lead to that kind of violence that we see in Norse mythology. Because if killing someone else keeps you alive, according to the Norse, that would have been good. Okay. Now, a lot of this comes into this whole idea of fatalism. And it's that concept that life might be bad today, but it's going to get worse. Okay. You know, when we first lived in Belarus, we saw sort of this attitude because there there was sort of this prevailing idea that since life had always been sort of rough, it would continue to be rough and would always increasingly get worse because if today's the worst day, I tell you, it also has to be the last day. And so it's almost like this hidden optimism within a pessimistic framework. So life is bad, but it's not as bad as it's going to be. So like guess we can look forward to that, right? And so when we first moved to Belarus, there were these old ladies that sat on a bench outside of our apartment, and we didn't really speak very much Russian yet. And so we would go down, we talk to them, and mostly we just talk about the stuff we could communicate with, which would be like the weather, like what do you think about the weather today? And the weather in Belarus is cold. Okay, it's a cold environment, like all these Norse stories had. And so we would go down, we ask these ladies, and they'd always say, "Well, it's bad, but it's going to get worse." That was their response every day. It's bad, but it's going to get worse. Now, when we were there that first year, they had the worst blizzard that they'd had in like 20 years or something. Okay, and it was bad. Like you had to like dig your way out of your apartment. I mean, snow was everywhere. And so we went down, and sure enough, these ladies kind of dug their little hole. They're sitting there in their bench, surrounded by snow. And we walked up to them like, "Hey, so what do you think about the weather today?" And they literally said, "Well, we can't remember it ever being this bad, but we can tell you it's going to get worse." Okay, that's that whole like fatalistic idea. Like today can't be as bad as it's going to get. Otherwise, today's my last day. Okay, and so that's what drove this Norse thought, right? So they were fatalistic because excuse me, sorry, largely because of the climate that they lived in, right? Like all of these environments were all in these very cold climates, right? So the Norse that were in Russia, the Norse that were in Northern Europe, all of them, all the environments were very, very cold. And so because of that, every single day they were facing death. Okay, think about like when the Pilgrims first came to America, like half of them died because they weren't prepared to face that environment yet, right? And so when you're in this kind of environment where you don't have electricity, so there's no way to really stay warm throughout the winter, they were seeing people die every single day. And so if you didn't die today, well, it's not your worst day. Today, man, it was bad. It's going to be bad. Every day is going to be bad, but it's not as bad as it's going to get. So there's that constant like fight against the climate that led to sort of this fatalistic mentality. Okay. I know I totally stumbled through that particular point, but thank you for bearing with me. Trickster wise, I'm going to talk more about Loki much later when we look into the stories, but kind of know he's coming, right? So he is the Norse trickster. Thorvald's Jotunheim, I would definitely be covering as well, and that's a good classic trickster story. Nature and animals, all of it's sort of centered around survival, right? Most of the ideas of nature and animals are not positive in Norse mythology. Okay, they are things you have to survive. Most of the creatures want to kill you. Okay, nature is always against you. Okay, so that's definitely going to come into play in these stories a lot. As far as fantastic beasts or beings go, there are actually some pretty famous ones in Norse thought. So elves, dwarfs, giants are the three biggies that I'm going to cover with you. And they are so popular that you definitely see them in other stories now as well, right? So elves, the closest thing we've covered to an elf so far would be like a demigod. Like they're more than a human, less than a god. So they live for a really long time. They kind of have special properties like the gods, but they can die. Okay, and so that's sort of what an elf would be. So don't think like Christmas elves or Keebler elves. Think Lord of the Rings elves. So they're usually like human size at least, and very beautiful, very powerful. There's two types: light elves and dark elves in the story. So light elves live in Elfheim. They're ruled over by Freyr, who we will definitely talk about later. Dark elves are ruled over by usually no one because they kind of do their own thing. And the difference between a light elf and a dark elf is that light elves are good and dark elves are evil. Okay, that's the difference. Typically, they look about the same. Some stories take dark elves and they sort of get corrupted, so they look more like goblinish toward the end of those stories, but most of the time they're both very beautiful. The only difference is light elves are good and positive and forces for good, and dark elves are not. Okay, so this is a picture that I originally had to try and contrast like that: good elf versus bad elf, corruption, but neither one of those are really great. So think more along these lines. So that's like a Lord of the Rings elf, which would be definitely what a Norse elf would look like, and that's just for you. All right, dwarfs. I feel like most of us kind of have a general idea what dwarfs are, right? So typically they're little shorter people. They are smiths. Okay, so they work in mines. They mine for precious metals. They make weapons and armor and things like that. They have long beards, men and women alike. And so that's all probably stuff that you're pretty familiar with. What most people don't realize about dwarfs is where they came from in Norse mythology, which is fittingly disgusting. They actually were created from maggots that were eating on the flesh of Ymir. Okay, so Ymir, first frost giant, they're like eating on his flesh, and that caused them to transform into the original dwarfs, which had to be quite the day for those original dwarfs. So that's what a dwarf looks like. Of course, those are Hobbit dwarfs, but that's again, J.R.R. Tolkien was influenced by these stories. That's a pretty accurate portrayal of what these dwarfs would most likely look like. Some more dwarfs. That one looks super creepy. All right, so then giants, I already kind of covered this. They are the chief enemies of the gods, and they are essentially gods themselves, right? You have two types again. You have frost giants and fire giants. They are not frost giants and fire giants because they have like ice power or fire power. I think that's what modern video games try and do with them. They are frost giants and fire giants because of where they live. Okay, frost giants live in Jotunheim, which is very cold. Fire giants live in Muspelheim, which is very hot. Okay, so that's where the difference comes from. So they would not look like this ice sickle dude, but they might look like that guy who just has frostbite, which is acceptable. Okay, they also would not look way bigger than the gods. Although some stories you're gonna get that. Like there's some stories where it's really super confusing, but most of the time they're about the same size as the gods. Okay. And so again, you're not gonna have a fire giant with like a flame head. You might have this guy who just forgot to turn off his lightsaber and had a bad day, but in general, they just look kind of like the gods. Okay. Valkyrie, you might have heard of. Valkyrie are warrior women, sort of like the Amazons, okay? But they work for Odin, okay? And so, who is the leader of the Aesir? And they are choosers of the slain. So, they fight in every single battle. And during those battles, they have to not only participate, but watch for the most valiant of the warriors. And when those warriors die, they then take them to Valhalla, okay? When they take them to Valhalla, those warriors are just going to chill in that hall, and the Valkyrie will like serve them mead and things until the final battle, which is called Ragnarok, which we'll talk about here in a second, where all those warriors will come back for one final fight, and they will all die again. Okay, and that's sort of what a Valkyrie does. So they always have these winged helmets. Sometimes they are also riding on like Pegasi, like winged horses, kind of looking like that. Now, Valhalla, the hall that they take them to, is the most famous hall in Asgard. It's not the only one. Odin has others. Like one of them is called Valhalla. The other one's like, at least that's how I pronounce it, something like that. But in general, this is where the most famous warriors go. Okay, so I always did this little like comparison, like not Valhalla. We have Valhalla and not Valhalla, but like I don't know. He doesn't teach at our school anymore, so it's becoming less and less funny. But I still do it. All right, so then Ragnarok. This is the last thing I'll talk about today. It is the ultimate destruction of all things. This is what feeds their fatalism. Okay, as general as this mythology is, and as like more of an outline than anything else as we see, this is the most specific part of the entire mythology, and it is actually a prophecy of what is going to happen. But it's very detailed. It's not just hey, eventually everything will be ruined because there's going to be a big war. It comes down to the specifics. Okay, so we know there's going to be a war between the goods. Okay, the Aesir led by Odin, and the evils, which are the giants, most of which are frost giants. Fire giants can come and play as well, led by Loki and his monster babies. Okay, so they're going to fight each other. But in this prophecy, we know like certain people are going to be killed and kill specific things. Okay, so we know like in this story, Odin is going to be eaten by a giant wolf. Like he knows that is going to happen. Okay, and so that's where this whole fatalism comes in, because Odin might have a lot of bad days, and he does. But if he wasn't eaten by a wolf today, it's not his worst day. Okay, and that's sort of what Ragnarok does. They know that this is their fate. They know that it can't be prevented because they're fatalistic. And so they try and push it off as long as they possibly can, but they know ultimately this is what is coming. Okay. So I do have a video I'm going to have you guys watch. I'm going to link that. It's like an overly sarcastic productions version of Ragnarok. I think it does a good job of walking you through it, probably better than I would. So check that out. And then I'm also linking a Kahoot for you guys to review just so you can see how much you understood. So hopefully this makes sense. Hopefully you guys are doing okay. If you need anything, don't forget to reach out. All right. Have a great day, guys. Make wise decisions, and I will see you. I don't know when I'm going to see you. Soon.